Welcome to The Explainer. We're diving into a really big question today, and we're using the latest findings from the 2024 Global Peace Index to get to the bottom of it. So the big question is this: is our world actually getting more peaceful or less? It's what the Global Peace Index looks at every single year. And, well, based on the very latest report, the answer is pretty clear. And unfortunately, it's not great. Just look at these numbers. The reality is, it's pretty stark. We saw peacefulness actually go down in 97 countries last year. Only 65 countries saw an improvement. And get this, that's the highest number of countries to see a decline in a single year since they even started this index. That's a huge deal. So, this isn't just a one-off bad year. It's actually part of a much longer kind of troubling trend. And a huge driver behind this is a massive spike in the number of active conflicts around the globe. 56. Just let that number sink in. That's how many state-based conflicts are active right now. It's a really sobering thought. And it's the highest that number has been since the end of the Second World War. Just incredible. Okay, so let's dig a little deeper into this stark reality of a world that's becoming less peaceful. Now, while conflict is definitely more widespread than it used to be, the report points to two major events: the conflicts in Gaza and Ukraine. They had a truly outsized impact, really dragging down the entire global average for peacefulness. But here's where it gets really interesting. It's not just that there are more conflicts. It's that the very nature of war itself seems to be changing. And that's making lasting peace, well, a whole lot harder to achieve. Think about how wars used to end, right? Back in the 1970s, almost half of them ended with a clear, decisive victory. Fast forward to the 2010s, and that number just plummets to 9%. And peace agreements, even more rare. This is what's led to what a lot of people are calling forever wars, these conflicts that just seem to burn on and on with no real end in sight. And one of the key reasons why is right here. As the report says, conflicts are becoming internationalized. What does that mean? It means they're not just local fights anymore. You have more and more outside countries getting involved. And that just makes trying to negotiate a lasting peace way more complicated. And it drags the fighting out for longer. How many countries are we talking about? 92. That's the number of countries now involved in conflicts beyond their own borders. And again, that is the highest number we've seen since the index began back in 2008. So what's driving this? Well, it's a mix of things. You've got rising competition between the big global powers, like the United States, Russia, and China, but also more assertive regional powers, like Iran and Turkey, who are all playing a more active role in conflicts that are happening far from their own homes. Okay, the other big shift is in the actual tools of war, and this brings up a really interesting paradox. On one hand, you have 112 countries that have actually reduced the number of people in their armed forces. But at the same time, global military capability, what these militaries can do, has gone up by 10%. So how does that work? Fewer soldiers but more power? The answer is technology. Look at this number, plus 1,400%. That is the absolutely staggering increase in drone attacks by non-state groups since just 2018. It's the perfect example of how new, cheaper, more accessible tech is completely changing the game on the battlefield. It's letting smaller groups pack a punch that can compete with much larger states. So as you can imagine, this new face of war, it comes with a massive, devastating cost, both in human lives and in economic terms. $19.1 trillion. That is the jaw-dropping economic impact of violence on the global economy for just 1 year, 2023. It's a number so huge, it's almost impossible to wrap your head around. So where is all that money going? Well, if you look at the breakdown, the vast majority of it, we're talking over 74%, is spent on just two things: military and internal security. What that really means is we're spending all these trillions just to contain violence, not to actually prevent it from happening in the first place. And to try and make that huge number a little more personal, it works out to about $2,380 for every single person on the planet. But, of course, the economic cost is one thing. The true cost is always human. Over 95 million people. That's how many are now either refugees or displaced inside their own countries because of violent conflict. To put that into perspective, that's more than the entire population of Germany. So, after all that, with such a bleak outlook, you have to ask, is there any path forward? The report says yes, there is. But it's going to require us to fundamentally rethink what we even mean when we say the word peace. The report draws this really critical distinction between two types of peace. On one hand, you have negative peace. That's just the absence of violence. The fighting stops. But then there's positive peace. And that's something much deeper. It's about actively building the attitudes, the institutions, the structures, things like good government, fair laws, a well-functioning society that actually create and sustain peaceful societies for the long haul. And this whole idea of positive peace, it isn't just some nice, hopeful theory. It's actually a data-driven model. The report makes a powerful argument that investing in these foundational elements is the single most effective way to build societies that are genuinely resilient and can actually maintain peace over the long term. Which really leaves us with the big central question, doesn't it? In a world that seems to be fragmenting more and more, how do we actually build the systems needed for a lasting peace? Can we make that huge shift from just being reactive, always running around putting out fires, to being proactive? To building the kinds of societies where those fires are far less likely to start in the first place? That's the real challenge. Thanks for joining this explainer.